things. So today I'm going to talk about this idea of the importance of befriending an other so that we can save the world. It's an old NBC Heroes show reference for you. All right, we are here. The music has stopped. The intro has concluded, and we are now live. Thank you for joining me today. Usually I do this, you can see here, usually I do this on Wednesdays at 11 a.m. But today I pushed it back to 1 p.m. And then it's now 1:26 p.m. and here I am. Because when you run your own show, you can just, I guess, do whatever you want. And so I'm doing that. But the reason why today I didn't start at 11 is because I wanted to watch the NBA Finals game that I missed last night. So I watched it this morning while doing email and other things. I had it on the screen over here. And so anyways, congratulations, Lakers. Although Miami Heat, I got to tell you, Miami Heat is a fun team to watch. They play as a team. Nobody on that team seems to be more important than another. So they're super fun to watch. But the Lakers are my favorite team and LeBron's my favorite player. So ultimately I'm cheering for them and I hope they take it all home on Friday. Okay, why are we here? Not like existentially, cosmically, because I have no idea the answer to that question. But why are we here together on this Facebook Live and today YouTube Live? Would you let me know if you're watching on YouTube? Because I haven't pushed these to YouTube yet until today. And I thought, well, why not? I've got almost 1,000 subscribers over on YouTube. Maybe somebody will tune into this as well. So if you're watching on YouTube, would you let me know? But today I'm going to take a pause on my Hatred is Lethal series. So if you've been hanging out with me lately, you know, over the past couple of months, I've been writing about the topic of hatred. And I do that at, you can see the little ticker here. I do that at my Substack page called Perspective Shift. And it gets delivered into your inbox every Wednesday. And for the past 2 months, I've been talking about the topic of hatred. I've been doing this series called Hatred is Lethal. And I can't state enough how fascinating it has been to do a deep dive into the topic of hatred. It's caused me to confront some of the hatred in my own life, specifically name hatred, how I've hated the president. And then lately now I've been working on some practical steps to eliminate the hatred from my heart. And so I've been writing that series at my Perspective Shift, which is the name of my weekly newsletter. And I've been then hopping on here live on Wednesdays to read live some of the past articles that I've written. So I'm going to pause today on my hatred series and I'll get back to it next week because today I wanted to talk about something different. And I thought we could talk about today this idea of tribalism and the moral circle and what's called Dunbar's number and what I think is super important, which is having people in our life who are different than us. More and more, we are increasingly creating these siloed, bespoke communities where we're really just surrounded with people that usually think and believe and talk and look and act like us. So, and I think that can be troublesome. So that's what I want to talk about today. So I wrote this article and I'm going to share it with you. So let's do the little side by side. Beep, there it is. And it's called Befriend Another, Save the World. And again, you can get this at colbymartin.substack.com. I encourage you to head there, read all my past articles if you want, if that's your thing. But more importantly, just subscribe so that then you can get Perspective Shift delivered into your inbox every week. So this article that I wrote, you can see back on January 30th of this year, before the world fell apart. This article was kind of a synopsis of a message that I gave at my church, Sojourn Grace Collective, several months back. I was doing this series called Transcending different aspects of religion. And so this message was about transcending tribalism. And I tried to do a synopsis of that. So obviously I'm not going to give the whole message here. That would be long and boring. And these are supposed to be somewhat short and hopefully interesting. So here's a little bit of how I kind of took these ideas of tribalism and the idea of the moral circle and Dunbar's number. And here's what I want to share with you today. Befriend another, save the world. And it goes like this. So I began talking about tribalism. And by the way, you can see that there's an asterisk in that second sentence there. And down at the bottom, I say that I'm conscious of how, where is the little, yes, I'm aware of the larger conversation surrounding the usage of the term tribe. And so I have an article linked into this article here that can help put some language around that that I learned a year ago. Actually, I was working on writing my second book, The Shift, and I used the word tribe quite a bit in here. And my editor said, have you sort of paid attention to some of the larger conversation that's been happening in some of the in some circles around this word tribe? And I hadn't, and now I have. And so now I've tried to be very selective about when I use that word and don't just throw it around so much, because there is some larger baggage around it. But the idea of tribalism, this is a phenomenon that has been with the human race for thousands and thousands and thousands of years. So in that context, this is how I use the term tribe and tribalism. So throughout the evolving journey of Homo sapiens, our ancestors, and this is what I want to say about tribalism, our ancestors gained certain advantages by banding together into larger and larger tribes. So part of how Homo sapiens became the dominant sapien tribe, if you've all know Harari's brilliant book, Sapiens, then you've learned how long time ago there was lots of human species, but now there's just Homo sapiens. And part of how the Homo sapiens tribe sort of overcame and outlived and conquered all the other human tribes was through their capacity to band together into larger and larger tribes. And so we have sort of coded into our brains, into our bodies, into our beings, we have coded into us this desire, this need to be a part of larger tribe, that we find safety. So I wrote that our brains crave being part of a group. We long for the safety of being in a tribe. And some of the advantages is that it alerts us to know who's in, who's out, who's with us, who's against us. So this ancient program of tribalism that runs in our brains as a result of these thousands upon thousands upon thousands of years of evolution, this program of tribalism running in our brains gives us this classic us versus them mentality. We don't have to necessarily moralize it just yet. We can just name that it's there, that we have operating in our brains this program of tribalism. Kind of like how right now on my computer, I've got multiple programs running. I've got Ecamm, which is delivering the live stream. I've got Audio Hijack, which is taking the audio signal from this microphone here and filtering it through some noise suppression and adding some effects and sends it into my earbud here so I can hear. I've got all these programs running that help me do things. As Homo sapiens, we have this program of tribalism where we want to be a part of a group. We want to be a part of something bigger than just us. And it just, as far as I see, it's a kind of a morally neutral program. It just is there. Then what we do with it, obviously, is where it begins to raise some moral questions. So that's tribalism. Then you move on to the concept of the moral circle. So if you're not familiar with the moral circle is this phenomenon which tries to name how humans, that's you and me, how we treat people. Do you like how I stipulated that you and me are humans? I mean, I might have cats that are watching or dogs that are watching. Would you just let me know in the comment section if you are a non-human and you're watching? So humans, we treat people differently. And again, I'm not trying to pass judgment here. I'm just naming what we know happens at a psychological level. We treat people differently depending on whether or not they are in our moral circle. So if someone is in our moral circle, and that could be friends, it could be family, it could be a member of our tribe, however we might define that, we end up affording them benefits like patience, which means that we're more patient with people that are in our moral circle. Respect, nuance. We understand that people are multidimensional, multifaceted, paradoxical beings. And we give that benefit to people who are in our moral circle. We understand there's more to you than just the sort of black and white labels that we might give to people. Patience, respect, nuance. We appreciate the context of their actions. So when you're driving down the freeway and someone cuts you off, you might just, because they're not in our moral circle, we just would say, oh, that person is an a-hole. But if they're in our moral circle, let's say we see that it's our sister that sort of cuts us off, and we're able to know, we're like, oh, well, I know that she's not a terrible person, so she must be really in a hurry somewhere. There must be some emergency going on, or maybe she didn't see me. So the point is we give people in our moral circle the benefit of the doubt by appreciating the context of their actions. But if people aren't in our moral circle, then we don't think about context. We just go straight to judgments. Okay, great. So we've got some other beings here. We have an alien tuned in. This is great. Thank you. Because I asked if you're non-human, would you let me know? We've got an alien, Ermagene alien tuned in. This is fantastic. Adet, you got a unicorn watching. This is wonderful. So this is why I'm just glad I can be open to all creatures, not just humans. Okay, so moral circle. We treat people that are in the moral circle differently than if they're out of a moral circle. We give them patience, respect. We appreciate context. We give them benefit of the doubt. But if people are outside our moral circle, then we're quicker to judge, we're quicker to cancel, we're quicker to dismiss. Okay, so far we talked about tribalism, this ancient program that runs in our mind that makes us long to be a part of a group larger than ourselves. Then we have the moral circle, which is a phenomenon that happens where we end up putting some people inside our moral circle and others out. And then infrahumanization is this overly technical term. It basically means this. Infrahumanization is when we subconsciously deny human characteristics to other people. So there are characteristics that are quintessentially human. So unlike the alien watching and the unicorn watching, there are some characteristics that are unique to the human species. So all species have fear and anger and suffering and pain. Like that's unique. But then beyond that, there are unique human characteristics and emotions. And infrahumanization is when we don't allow for other people to have those secondary emotions, those secondary characteristics that are unique to humans. And when we do that, when we infrahumanize someone, we in a sense we strip them of their humanity. We no longer treat them as human. We don't do it consciously, but subconsciously, when we deny people sort of these unique human characteristics, then that allows us to treat them as less than human in a way that doesn't sort of activate that moral conscience that normally would say, oh, you got to treat people with kindness and respect. But if they have become less than human in our minds as a result of infrahumanization, then we can treat them like crap and not feel bad about it, which is kind of scary. And we talked about that actually in the hatred series that I took a pause for today. We talked about how we end up, we feel fine hating other people because we think it's justified, because we don't see them as fully human. And so our normal moral inhibitions that would govern how much we exhibit things like hate, they are like shut off. And so this is the process of infrahumanization. Since they're less than human, we can treat them differently. We can treat them worse and not feel bad about it. Okay, so then the fourth thing is Dunbar's number. So far we've talked about tribalism, we've talked about the moral circle, we've talked about infrahumanization, and now Dunbar's number. So some of you might be familiar with Dunbar's number. Let me know if you've ever heard of Dunbar's number prior to this and how many times I can say Dunbar's number in one long run-on sentence. So 30 years ago, anthropologist Robin Dunbar, and again, I've got you can see hyperlinks there. All of this is an article that is published at my Substack page that I invite you to go on. And right now, I give you permission, open up a new tab in your browser and go subscribe right now. Anyway, Robin Dunbar put out this idea that the human brain can only reasonably sustain stable social relationships with about 150 people. About 150 people. It's kind of all that we can, and all of what goes into a stable relationship means we remember their names. We remember maybe basic facts about them. We have some semblance of regular communication with them. Only about 150 people can the human brain reasonably sort of hold on to. After that, it becomes like books on a bookshelf, where if you add another one, eventually one that you haven't thought about in forever, you kind of just forget about that person. About 150 person. Beyond that number, the human brain doesn't really have the capacity or the ability to track details or important information. So I have this little diagram here. I hope you can see it on your screen. I have this diagram where you see in the middle, you have your 150 people. And you can then sort of draw around that the moral circle that we talked about a minute ago. And the moral circle is filled with people that are close friends, it's filled with people that are relatives of yours, people that have common interests and shared belief. Maybe you have particular shared life experiences. And these people are in your moral circle, and you can only really hold on to about 150 of them. And then outside of your moral circle, and again, we go back to when people are outside the moral circle, then we end up treating them differently without really consciously thinking about it or feeling bad because of infrahumanization. We have people outside that are not a part of our tribe. And maybe it's people of different beliefs, people who are politically different than we are, or culturally foreign to us. And here's where all of this gets a little bit fascinating and I think maybe a bit scary. Once a person's limit for connection is reached, once we've sort of filled up that 150 number, if someone is sort of beyond what we can hold on to, that Dunbar number, what we find is that the human brain predictably resorts to combinations of hierarchical schemes, stereotypes, and other simplified models, all as a way to try and comprehend so many different kinds of people. What's that mean? That means the people that are outside that 150 number, people that are outside our moral circle. Remember, when the moral circle, we allow nuance and paradox and context to people, but if you're outside of that, the brain reduces it all, simplifies it. We grab stereotypes, we grab like mischaracterizations. We just, all of it, the human brain, in order to even sort of function with people beyond 150, we resort to simplified models of who those people are. Adet says 150, that's a lot. Yeah, that's not saying that everybody has 150 people in their social circle. It just means that you can't really sustain more than that, is all that that's saying. It's saying that if you know more than 150 people, your brain will start to, there's diminishing returns on how much information you can hold about them, which means, you know, let's say right here, the brain, in order to function properly, conserves resources by making mental shortcuts for the people that are outside of our moral circle. And I call this the danger of a bespoke community. Bespoke things are great. Bespoke suits, bespoke clothes, bespoke interior design, all this where it's like curated just for you. That's a wonderful phenomenon. And there's a sense in which a bespoke community is really great too, but it has its downsides. So I write, the problem as I see it is that as a result of social media, hyper-partisan news and politics, and globalization via the interwebs, we're becoming more and more siloed in our social networks. Our 150 people from Dunbar's number, the moral circle, have become a sort of bespoke community, specifically curated to look, act, talk, and think like us. We've cherry-picked from within our various tribes who our people are. And tribalism, this ancient program that runs deep in our bones, rewards us for this. The program says, yes, create your tribe. There's safety, there's safety, there's safety. Make your tribe. But the risk to me seems a little obvious here. If everyone in my inner social network reflects basically what I already think about the world, then when it comes to people who believe or think or act differently than me, that sort of person is already outside my 150 limit, which means I will, through no conscious fault of my own, I'm not trying to do this, but through will on subconscious programs of my brain, I'll reduce them to just labels and stereotypes. I'll reduce people to just labels and stereotypes, not consciously, but it happens as a result of tribalism, moral circle, infrahumanization, Dunbar's number, like we've already talked about. And so this pattern of labeling people who are unlike us, flattening them to these stereotypes, it just feeds this destructive and divisive pattern where we talk about, think about, and treat people who are different from us as less than human. This is why we have such a hard time holding on to the humanity of people who are so politically different than us, holding on to the humanity of people whose lifestyles are so very different from us, holding on to the humanity of people whose culture or ethnicity is different. We can have sometimes have a hard time holding on to their humanity because of all these sort of psychological and emotional and biological programs. And we don't even feel bad about doing it oftentimes because of infrahumanization. In other words, we're not moral monsters. There's just things happening that if we're not aware of, there's things happening that will make it so we don't feel bad with using labels and stereotypes, these shortcuts that our brains grab onto. So this is why, right here, this is why when one of our guys, have you ever noticed this? When one of our guys, whoever that might be, one of Democrats or progressive Christians or whoever your guy, whatever, one of our guys, when they get caught doing something morally questionable, we say, let's wait for all the information or dig deeper into the context, or let's hold it in light of all the things they've done in the past. Like, this isn't the only thing about them. Like, when it's our people, we want context, we want nuance, we want to be able to hold it with all of the things that are true about them. But one of them, if someone on the other side, on the other team, gets caught up in the same sort of morally questionable act, whatever it might be, we immediately resort to labels. Well, that person's racist. That person's homophobic. That person's xenophobic. Familiar with these labels that we reduce people to? That person's lazy. They're incompetent. They're sexist, and so on. We don't reserve judgment. We don't consider the context. We don't appreciate the nuance. So my diagram here continues. People that are in our moral circle, our close friends and relatives, we hold nuance and paradox for them. But outside of that moral circle, the brain, in order to even function in this chaotic world, it conserves resources by making these mental shortcuts. And so people outside are lazy, stupid, racist, homophobic, etc. We give them these labels and stereotypes. And I think this is a problem. This is why I think we need to intentionally, so here's my attempt at finding some solution to this thing that happens at a subconscious level. We need to intentionally befriend people who are very much not like us. We need to intentionally befriend people. And if befriend is too strong of a word, at least consider having people close enough that they are inside your 150 Dunbar number moral circle. Maybe you don't become friends with them, but you hold them close enough to you to where they force you to not reduce people to labels and stereotypes. Because the closer you get to people, I say, the more your brain is afforded the opportunity to see all of the complicated beauty therein, all of the strange paradox they hold as humans, the both and of their warts and whatever the beauty part of the opposite of warts, smoothness, I don't know. Left unto itself, I write, our brains will continue to crave being in tribes with like-minded people. This is just normal and natural as our ancestors have given us this program. That's why I said up top, it's a morally neutral program, this tribalism. But what we do with it now, we have some choices to make. This program of tribalism will reward us for surrounding ourselves with people who make us feel safe. And all of that can, at times, absolutely serve a wonderful purpose for sure. But I think we need to be honest about the downsides of this as well. If we want to have any hope to avoid a world that's more divided, that's more fractured, more at war, which I hope we do want to avoid that sort of world, then we have to be intentional about building relationships with the political, ideological, and religious other. So those are my thoughts that I wrote a couple months ago on this article called Befriend and Other, Save the World. So we got a question here. Irma Jean asks, then how does anyone sit on a jury to decide the fate of another? It's a good question. Part of me says, I don't know. I've never had to do that before. I've never been on a jury. But I think if I understand the question here, what I might say to that is, I think there's something slightly different between, so in a jury, you're attempting to hold all of the facts and evidence and data that are presented to you and try and get close to, within the confines of the judicial system, try and get close to an assessment of whether there's enough data or evidence to support someone's guilt or prove them innocent. Or I guess innocent until proven guilty, prove their guilt or maintain their innocence. But I don't think this is the same thing as the concept of tribalism and moral circle and Dunbar's number and etc., which is the idea here is how can we hold enough people in our moral circle that are different than us so that we don't resort to stereotypes and labels for people who are different than us? Because it's the squashing people to just stereotypes and labels that I think is what is really troublesome and really causes us to keep people at such an arm's distance that are different than us. Odette says maybe the brain put aside the people that are not inside that circle as self-protection. Yeah, I think that is absolutely a thing that happens. And so I think this is why it takes some intentional effort. And by the way, I'm not great at this. I like my bespoke community. I like being surrounded by people that think like me and act like me and talk like me. It's super uncomfortable to be in a relationship with people that are so philosophically and ideologically other and different than me. So the point here is not that this stuff is easy and that you should just, go grab a bunch of friends who are different than you. No. The point is that it is hard work that I think is hard work that we have to be willing to put in if what we want is a world that is less fractured, less at war, less divided. Honestly, if someone's comfortable with the level of division and fracturing in our world, then at some level, I guess we can stay in our silos, and that's fine. Now, I'm conscious of how there's an entire other aspect to this conversation. There's a bunch of layers. One of the layers is if it's no longer safe to your being to have people that are different than you into your moral circle, that brings up a whole new set of questions. So the idea here, I'm not advocating that we open up our moral circle to people who are so different than us in a way that puts ourselves and people we love in harm's way. Now we're talking about a slightly different thing. I get that it's related, but it's different. So I'm also not advocating that we just let everybody into your life, people that are different than you. Well, no, that isn't the point here. The point is I want us to be conscious of how these things like tribalism, this is an ancient program that runs in our brain that rewards us for surrounding us with people who are just like us. We need to be aware of this so that we can choose to engage with it in a way that is responsible and purposeful. We need to be aware of the moral circle, what happens when people that are outside of our moral circle, how we treat them differently and we don't even stop to think about it. We need to be aware of Dunbar's number, that our brain doesn't want us to have relationships with more than 150 people. So all of these are sort of working to keep this siloed world in it. My hope is that we just become aware of these things enough to where we can make intentional and conscious and mindful choices to expand our moral circle, to rehumanize people that we might have infrahumanized. And hopefully this will be some of how we start to move toward a world that's more connected, more at peace, less divided, less fractured, more respectful of other people's humanity. Okay. Thank you for being with me today here at here in my office, in my spare bedroom, but also just here online for my Perspective Shift live that I do on Wednesdays. And I hope to see you next Wednesday. I'll probably be back to my normal scheduled time, which is 11 a.m. Pacific time. But again, today I did things a little bit differently because I had to catch up on the Laker game. So I watched that this morning and that pushed everything back. But I invite you, please, if you would, go to colbymartin.substack.com, sign up to get my Perspective Shift newsletter delivered right to your inbox, and then join me on Wednesdays. Again, I'm going to stream to Facebook and YouTube. I did YouTube today, but nobody commented. I don't know if anybody's watching on YouTube or I just didn't get their comments, but whatever. YouTube's fun, and I'm going to start streaming to there as well. So I love you. Have a wonderful week, and I'll see you next Wednesday. Peace out. If you'd like to sign up to get my weekly newsletter, Perspective Shift, where I examine life through a mixed lens of progressive Christianity, psychology, and spirituality, simply head over to colbymartin.substack.com. Enter your email address and click subscribe. And once you're in, you'll see that all my past articles are here. And don't worry, you don't have to do anything about missing anything because every new edition of the newsletter goes directly to your inbox. And periodically, I'll hop on the Facebook Live here and do a live reading of a past article. So just make sure that you go to facebook.com/ColbyMartinAuthor, and then if you haven't already, you click this little guy here and you like my page. That way Facebook will say, hey, guess what? Colby's going live. Thanks for tuning in.